On the second day of climbing's Olympic debut, the women's qualifiers got underway. The field got off to a flying start with a whole host of talent in the speed category. Alexandra Miroslav from Poland had an incredible run in the speed, getting just 100th of a second away from the world record. That'll be one to watch in the final. There were strong performances from Japanese climbers Nonaka and Noguchi, whilst Janja Garnbret got off to a nervous start with a couple of slips. Her nerves seemed to be forgotten about in the bouldering as she coolly flashed all 4 problems. American Brooke Rabatu, who's been on an upward trajectory coming into the games, impressed throughout. And veterans Akio Noguchi and Shauna Coxey showed their experience taking the 3rd and 4th positions. It was all to play for going into the lead. Shauna needed to maintain her place against a strong field of lead specialists. The route setters gave the climbers a tough test. Lead specialists such as Laura Rigora fell just halfway up the route. 17-year-old Theo from South Korea climbed smoothly into the finals, along with other strong favourites Noguchi, Nonaka and Garnbret. Shauna Coxey has given us a lot to cheer about over the last decade, and her incredible career came to an end after she finished in an impressive 10th place. Here are our women's Olympic finalists. Janja Garnbret from Slovenia, Seeun Seo from Korea, Miho Nonaka from Japan, Akio Noguchi from Japan, Brooke Rabatu from the USA, Jessica Pilz from Austria, Alexandra Miroslav from Poland, and Anouk Jobert from France. Natalie Berry was on the ground in Tokyo watching the event. Let's see what she has to say before she goes to bed.
It's 2 a.m, so another late finish. I'm pretty knackered, but loving it. I had another really good day just in the athletes. Some of them seemed a bit more anxious than expected. I thought Janja was quite tense in speed, or she said afterwards that she didn't have a good speed round. She felt nervous, and then she just kind of let it all out in the boulder round and really redeemed herself. Secured her final place, she came first, and then didn't do as well as she would have liked on the lead route, but she'd done enough, so it didn't really matter. Other top performances, I think the Americans did really well. It was a shame for Kyra to miss out, but Brooke, as ever, looking on form in 2021, really psyched for her to make the final. But I was really psyched for the Japanese team. Again, they've got all 4 climbers through now, with Akio and Miho making it through tonight, so that's going to be really exciting next few days for them and for the Japanese fans. Yeah, really psyched for Shauna coming 10th. I think she didn't expect that much coming into this competition because she's had so many injuries to deal with since qualifying 2 years ago now, which seems mental. I can't believe it's been that long. But yeah, she had 2 really good speed runs, and then in the boulder round looked really relaxed and happy, and yeah, came 4th, which is incredible. And then on the lead route, didn't quite do enough to make finals, but 10th place in the Olympics. She's an Olympian. I think that was more than she expected, really, and she should be really proud of herself. I think everyone in the UK is really proud of her. It's sad that she's retiring from competitions, but I'm sure we'll see more of her on rock.
Now we have our women's finalists. Let's take a look at who we think are the favourites.
Hailing from the small but disproportionately good at climbing country of Slovenia, Janja Garnbret was surrounded by IFSC heroes and heroines and a band of talented contemporaries from a young age when she started climbing at 7 years old. Garnbret has set so many records and won so many events in competition climbing that she has few accolades left to achieve, the title of Olympic champion being the obvious next step. And you would be a fool to bet against her. Garnbret has won back-to-back world championships in boulder and combined in 2018 and 19. And she also reclaimed the lead title in 2019. She's the only athlete to have won a clean sweep of all 6 Bouldering World Cup events in a season, 2019, completing 74 out of 78 of the boulders put in front of her, and has won 8 World Cup overall titles across lead, boulder and combined. In 2019, she did the triple of lead, boulder and combined at the IFSC World Championships in Hachioji, where she deservedly earned her #1 seed ranking for the Tokyo Games. In 2021, she broke yet another record, winning her 8th Boulder World Cup in a row, the most consecutive victories in IFSC World Cup history. With 4 World Cup overall titles and 6 second-place finishes, a strong case could be made for Theo Noguchi being the greatest competition boulder of all time. The statistics don't even tell the whole story. She's claimed those 10 top 2 season finishes, not by being stronger than virtually everyone else, simply being better. Noguchi's movement is unique, and her ability to understand and adapt to a boulder is unsurpassed. She's also got exceptional mobility and is able to execute moves that would be physically impossible for other climbers, even if they were able to figure them out. She's not bad on a lead wall either and has picked up 10 lead World Cup medals and a bronze in the discipline all the way back at the 2005 World Championships. Colorado-born Brooke Raboutou undoubtedly has one of the best backstories of the Tokyo 2020 Games. Given her heritage as the daughter of competition climbing's early superstars in the 80s and 90s, Robin Ebersfield-Raboutou, 4 times World Cup champion and 1995 World champion, and Didier Raboutou, 3 times World Cup champion, Brooke seemed destined to become a talented climber, and her participation in the sport's Olympic debut is a perfect high point in the family narrative. Now, she's up there with the best, with 3 World Cup medals ahead of Tokyo, but given her relative inexperience, she's an up-and-coming all-rounder thanks to the majority of her competition experience being rooted in the combined discipline. Raboutou's movement is gymnastic, combining dynamic skills with tidy footwork and smooth transitions, which play to her advantage in lead, her strongest discipline. In the Speed World Cups prior to Hachioji, Raboutou was cutting her PB down with each event she entered. And in Hachioji, it turned out to be her best result, which all bodes well for Tokyo in a field where speed is generally the weakest link.
Bouldering is the favourite discipline of many in the field. Mike Langley caught up with Billy Ridal to give us an overview of the event.
Okay, so we're here with Billy. Billy's a World Cup climber who's made Bouldering World Cup semi-finals. Billy, you obviously have a pretty good idea of what it takes to be a top-level boulderer. Run us through kind of how the day works as a competition climber heading into a bouldering round.
Yeah, so normally you're up pretty early, out of bed and straight into an isolation area. You're not allowed to see any of the boulders beforehand, so you're in your own little world, trying to not get too distracted by the other climbers, going through your warm-up process, trying to keep focused on what you're doing, how your body's feeling, and then trying to go through a range of movements whilst you're on the climbing wall to get everything in your body activated, which I find gives you a lot of confidence when you've been moving in a lot of different ways, and so you feel prepared for anything that the route setters might throw at you.
Do you ever try and predict what the route setters might have in front of you? Like you say, you've got this warm-up wall and you're trying different kind of movement patterns, jumps, big wide bridges or footwork or whatever it might be. When you're coming out to the round, do you feel like you're well prepared, or do you have an idea of what might be out there? Or is it purely like guesswork?
So from our training, I think we have a pretty good idea of most of the things that the route setters throw in quite often. Mm-hmm. So some dynamic movements, trying to move in different ways. Some boulders allow you to move sort of quickly and flowy and allow your body to move where it wants to. And other setting styles force you to be very rigid, and you have to sort of force your way through movements and put yourself into awkward positions. So during the warm-up, you're just trying to do as many different things as possible. And then a lot of the time it comes down to what the route setters have thrown in to try and catch you out, because their goal is to try and find things that you're not prepared for and test the climbers on who's the most adaptable. So trying to do as much as possible, basically.
Something that a lot of viewers, especially the older generation of climbers, outdoor climbers, would look at a modern bouldering wall today and be a bit shocked as to what they're seeing. People have got to be very adaptable to a lot of different styles, and there is a lot of kind of different movement patterns to what you might have seen 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, so in recent years, there's been a movement more and more towards dynamic and gymnastic style movements. But I think there's a bit of a misconception that means that the traditional climbing strengths have been lost, because nowadays the dynamicism is required, but it's also between very poor handholds, and so the more basic climbing strength that people come to expect in your fingers and your arms is still present as well. It's just sort of masked by the fast movement that people are doing.
Yeah.
But there's still a huge amount of body strength required to just hold the positions that they're moving between.
It's almost like a combination of all of the factors of climbing. Now you've got to have the finger power, but it's combined with potentially a dynamic move all rolled into one.
Yeah, exactly. It's just been built on over the years by the setters as the climbers develop.
So one of the interesting things about the Olympics is it's speed, then boulder, and then lead. And quite a few of the climbers might be traditionally seen as specialists in either lead, boulder, or speed. I'm guessing some of the speed climbers are going to suffer a little bit on the bouldering round.
Yeah, so historically the speed climbers have been quite separated from the rest of the competition climbing community, and they've trained in a very different way and don't actually spend very much time doing normal climbing. And so when this combined discipline has been created, they were sort of fish out of water in a big way, because they just didn't compete in any sort of environment like that. And so they've been sort of scrabbling to try and catch up to the boulders and lead climbers who do a lot more of that. And so their sort of body composition and the way that they climb is not very well set up, and so they had to do a lot of adapting to try and catch up, basically.
What would, if they've come through the speed round, they've done really well, are they going to be even thinking about the next two rounds, or are they just going to be trying to do sort of damage limitation?
Yeah, so the way that the scoring system works is the speed climbs are picking up the majority of their points from a really good speed result, where if they can get a 1 or a 2, it'll be massive for them going through to the finals round. Whereas realistically, they're not going to be scoring highly in the boulder and lead against all the specialists in those disciplines. And so yes, exactly, they're trying to sort of get ahead of the other speed climbers. There's sort of a small competition going on between the speed athletes that are qualified to who can get the best at the other two disciplines.
So a bouldering competition can be all different styles. There's 3 different angles on the Olympic wall, roughly speaking. The route setters, they have no guide to work to, they just turn up and create. That means that the challenge for you, there can be all sorts of different things thrown in front of you. How do you prepare for the different styles, and can the different styles dictate how the round goes?
So when you've been competing a long time, you'll find that different athletes favour different styles of boulders, and also different difficulties. Some of the athletes are exceptionally strong, and when a really difficult boulder comes along, they can shine through and be sort of the star of a round by getting the only person to do a move. And other rounds are easier, and it's more about your perfect execution and not making any mistakes. And it makes the complexion of the round very different, and the stresses on the athlete are very different as well. And so for the setters, there's a consideration within the bouldering round that the spectrum of abilities is larger, with there being lead specialists and speed specialists climbing as well as just the boulderers. And so they need to have considerations in their setting that not all of the moves are at the level that the boulderers would normally compete on, which makes it the split between the athletes quite challenging.
So the qualification round is a 4 boulder set, but the finals is a 3 boulder set. Does that change the way the route setters are going to approach it, do you think, for the athletes?
I think it's really difficult for the route setters because obviously they've got fewer opportunities to test the athletes, and obviously less wall space and less holds movements to test different styles. And so I think probably they're going to try and cram a bigger variety of movement styles into fewer boulders, which might create very contrasting movements within the same climbs.
It's going to be interesting to see. As an athlete, if you were put into that situation, you've been through the 4 boulder qualification and you're going now into a 3 boulder round, would you approach it differently? Like, would you give more on each boulder?
I don't know that I'll be giving more, because every boulder that I'm coming out to I'm going to try and give everything to, but I'm going to be very conscious that there's fewer opportunities for me to make ground on the other athletes. And so every attempt is going to count. Trying to focus on not making mistakes is going to be really key, I think.
One of the big factors that is going to be key is the conditions. You're looking at potentially 90% humidity, over 30 degrees every day. The competition is held in the evening, but it's still going to be a bit of a sweat fest. And skin conditions can be so important in climbing. It seems to be that most climbers have a different type of skin and it reacts differently to heat and humidity. How do you think that plays into the competition from your experience?
Yeah, so I think the athletes will be really struggling on this, and even though you won't necessarily see it coming through on the coverage of it, a lot of the results may well come down to how well the athletes do manage their skin. And so there's a lot of stereotypes of the athletes staring at their hands after every boulder, And if the skin is really sweaty, they'll be struggling to hold on to the holds. And so their routines of different skincare products that they're putting on, perhaps using a fan to keep their skin cool between every round, and trying to put maximum quality into every effort as well, because any wasted effort when you're sliding down a big frictiony volume is skin wasted. And if you end up with some bleeding tips, you're in a whole world of pain trying to carry on through the competition.
Bouldering is a totally spectacular sport and it can look incredible. What do you hope that we see at the Olympics from the bouldering? I
think that gymnastics has always been a star of the show at the Olympics, and climbing holds a lot of similarities to that, with also things thrown in from parkour and obviously more traditional climbing as well. And I think there's a lot of elements within it which could make for a really fantastic show for the general public. And hopefully, if the setting comes down correctly and the athletes put it together well, there could be some really special moments that come out of the bouldering, especially when the pressure is really high and the time they need to put the performance in now, and everything can come together and you get something really magical.
The men's final begins tomorrow with 7 climbers competing after Bassam Mawem's bicep injury forced him to retire. If you want to watch uninterrupted coverage in the UK, we recommend subscribing to Eurosport for a month. You'll be able to watch on the web or through the app. See you tomorrow, sports fans. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get all the latest updates from the men's finals tomorrow.